So today I'm not going to share what you would typically expect from the costly mistakes a seller or buyer can make. Believe it or not, some of these mistakes actually could cost tens of thousands to upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars in property tax or capital gains. So stay tuned to the end so you don't fall for any of these real estate mistakes. Now, I should start by saying I'm not an attorney, CPA, or financial planner, and this video is really for informational purposes only. I suggest you seek the proper legal or tax professional for advice when it comes down to your own individual circumstances. I'm Harold Powell. I'm a local real estate agent here in Ventura, and if you're looking for all things real estate for Ventura and the surrounding areas, well, I suggest hitting the like, subscribe, and bell icon to be notified of future content. All right, so let's take a quick look at the 5 mistakes you don't want to make when owning real estate. Mistake number 1 is holding title as joint tenants when community property is an option. Now, married couples can elect to either hold title as either joint tenants or community property when they purchase a property. So let's take a quick look at the tax advantage of community property versus joint tenancy. So in community property, when a spouse passes away, you get a double stepped up in basis, while joint tenancy only receives a single stepped up basis. Question is, what does this even mean? Well, let's take an example of a home in which title is held under community property. The home is purchased for $200,000 and 20 years later the husband passes away. The value of the home at the time of death is $2 million. And the wife decides to sell the house at that time for $2 million. Well, the husband's half gets a stepped up basis to $1 million, and the wife also gets a stepped up basis to $1 million as well. So there is 0 capital gains on the $2 million house sale since the new basis is $2 million. Compare this same example, but holding title under joint tenancy. Well, in this case, when the husband passes away, just like community property, his half gets a stepped up basis to $1 million. The surviving spouse, however, does not get a stepped up basis. Since they bought the house for $200,000, her half of the cost basis is only $100,000. So the result is $900,000 of capital gains. A side note, the wife would be able to use the principal residence rule, which allows a single person to exclude up to $250,000 of capital gain, which would drop the capital gains in this amount to $650,000. Unfortunately, there still is a sizable tax bill that results from this. As you can see, for tax reasons alone, community property has a huge advantage over joint tenancy. Don't make this mistake. Now, you may be wondering if I should bother putting the property in a trust if we hold title as community property, which brings me to mistake number 2, which is thinking of a will is just as good as a trust. Now, starting April 1st, 2025, California's probate threshold for a primary residence is $750,000, meaning estates with primary residence valued under that amount can potentially avoid full probate proceedings. Otherwise, if there is only a will when both spouses pass away without a trust and the property exceeds $750,000, then the property will need to go through probate. The probate not only costs the heirs about 5% of the sale price, it also takes another 9 to 10 months just to settle probate and go through that process, assuming no one objects. The trust will cost about $300 to $3,500 for a typical living trust. Sometimes a parent thinks they can avoid setting up a trust or avoid probate by deciding to quitclaim a portion of the property to the heirs, thinking it will make it easier to transfer title. Well, this brings me to mistake number 3. Quitclaiming the property to my kids or adding them to title before the homeowner or parent passes away. Now, this is a huge mistake and cause a multitude of problems that are much worse than even avoiding probate. The first problem is that in California, it will likely trigger a property tax reassessment at today's prices. So a quick explanation of this is when you add a different person to title, it notifies the county tax assessor of a change of ownership. If, for example, a single parent decides to add a child to title, it will likely cause half of the property to be reassessed at the full value while the parent is still alive. And if that's not enough, well, when the child who is added goes to sell, they don't get the full stepped up basis that they would normally happen when a parent passes away. So let's take a quick look at an example of how this would normally work. The decedent originally purchased the property for, again, $200,000. The inherited property stepped up basis at the time of death is $1 million. And their heir sells $1 million. So the inherited property stepped up basis at the time of death is $1 million. The heir decides to sell for $1 million and pays no capital gains. But if the property where the parent added the child to title, well, in that case, the child would only receive half of the stepped up basis. So using the same example, the decedent originally purchased the property at $200,000. The inherited property is valued at $1 million. So the stepped up basis at the time of death is going to be $500,000. And their heir sells the property for $1 million and now has to pay capital gains on $500,000 instead of no capital gains in the first example. Ouch. Now, as a side note, as a service to our clients, we do provide an estimate of value for the date of death, which most CPAs will accept as the new stepped up basis of value for the property. Moving on to mistake number 4. The mistake of not filing the 2 forms that allow a child to inherit the property taxes of a parent's principal residence within a year of passing. So you need to be aware of this, that siblings that are considering keeping their parents' property in California may be able to transfer their property's parents' low property tax basis due to Prop 13 and Prop 19. So with the passage of Prop 19 in California, some properties will be reassessed at the current market value unless within 1 year of transfer, the child who inherited the property lives in the property as his or her principal residence and files 2 forms that are filed within the county assessor. The first form is the heir needs to file for is the homeowner's exemption or disabled vet's exemption form within 1 year of the transfer. Now, pro tip, if the property was inherited as a result of a death, the date of death is always considered the date of transfer for property tax purposes, not the date the property was distributed. Number 2 is file the claim for reassessment exclusion for transfer between parent and child form. Now, the claim form cannot be filed before the homeowner's exemption or the disabled veteran's exemption. The nice thing is both of these forms can be found online with the county tax assessor. Now, there are going to be some limits on property tax exclusion, so check with your tax attorney or tax professional on the details and limitations. Moving on to mistake number 5. Now, this happens to those who are 55 and older and live in a property in California and either not moving because they're not aware that they can actually transfer the property tax in California, or worse yet, not filing the property tax transfer when they move to another property in California. Obviously, a big consideration for homeowners moving to another property in California is having to pay a higher property tax. Well, with the Prop 19, you can transfer your property tax base of your principal residence to another property as long as you are over 55 years old. Now, a couple things to be aware of. Number 1 is the property tax transfer does not take place in escrow. Both the primary residence must have closed as well as the new purchase has to have closed in order to file the form. Then you will file the new property tax in the county that you are purchasing in. And you can find the paperwork online at the county tax assessor's office where your replacement property is purchased. And if you do want to know more about how to calculate your property tax, if you decide to buy even a more expensive house, Well, I suggest watching my video on property tax transfer, Prop 19 Explained. And there I will walk you through an example as well as how to calculate your new tax assessment. Now, like I mentioned earlier, don't take my word for it. Talk to a tax or legal professional for your situation so you don't make the wrong decision that costs you or your heirs thousands of dollars. Otherwise, be sure to give this video a like if you enjoyed today's content. Thanks.